It is the middle watch of the night on a high ridge overlooking the valley of Jezreel, and 300 men are standing in the dark with both hands full. Down below, the Midianite army stretches across the floor of the valley like locusts, their camels without number. The men on the ridge are an attack force, but if you look closely at their hands, there is no iron. There are no shields. There is no drawn sword anywhere on the hill. Look at what they hold. In one hand, they grip a ram's horn. In the other, they hold an empty pitcher made of baked clay, carrying a burning torch sealed inside it. The God of Israel has systematically stripped an army of its weapons, forcing a remnant to march against an empire holding only fragile pottery, hidden fire, and breath. Judges chapter 7, verse 16 inches. The King James Version records the final inventory of this strange militia. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet in every man's hand, with empty pitchers and lamps within the pitchers. Picture it, 3 companies of 100 men each, taking their positions in absolute silence. The historian Flavius Josephus, writing his Antiquities of the Jews in the 1st century, describes the psychological terror of this exact military formation. Josephus notes that Midian was not just a unified army. It was a sprawling, chaotic coalition of nomads resting in a fragile alliance. I offer it as that, one ancient historian's record, but it frames the tension of the valley perfectly. The Midianites were heavily armed, heavily armored, and deeply superstitious. A powder keg waiting for a spark. But look again at the text. The English word pitcher makes it sound like a common water jug. The Hebrew word used here is kad. It is an earthen vessel, a heavy jar made of fired clay, thick enough to block out light completely. And the word for the fire inside is lapid. It is not a gentle lamp. A lapid is a blazing, smoking torch. Read that again. They are holding a raging fire inside an airtight box of earth. Fire requires oxygen to survive. If you seal a blazing torch inside a clay jar, the flame chokes. It dies in the dark. Yet these 300 men have been standing on the perimeter of the camp, waiting in the blackness, and their torches are not going out. Watch what the text does. Gideon has not given his men a tactical advantage. He has given them a massive physical liability. Both hands are entirely occupied. A man holding a horn to his mouth and a heavy clay jar in his fist cannot defend himself if a sentry spots him. He cannot draw a blade. He is completely exposed, standing on the edge of slaughter, trusting a flame he cannot even see. Same hill, same impossible odds. The valley of Jezreel has seen the blood of kings and empires. It is a corridor built for chariots and heavy infantry. The Midianites brought the greatest war machine of their generation into this specific corridor, intending to crush the Israelites under sheer numerical weight. Gideon started with 32,000 men. It was a small force, but it was an army. Now, there are only 300 left on the ridge. The math does not work. The clay is heavy. The night is cold. The Midianite guards are rotating their shifts down below, scanning the ridgeline for movement. If a single jar slips from a sweating palm and shatters early, the element of surprise is gone. 300 men will be slaughtered in minutes. The entire survival of a nation rests on the fragile integrity of baked dirt. 300 men are holding their breath on a dark ridge, trusting a hidden flame they cannot see. But this is not where the strange dismantling of their military might began. How did a general with 32,000 armed soldiers end up on a hill with a handful of men holding pottery? See the scene. It is days before the midnight watch on the ridge. Gideon is standing at the spring of Harod. Behind him, 32,000 men grip iron and wood. Down in the valley, The Midianite coalition numbers over 135,000. Gideon is outnumbered 4-1. Military logic dictates you draft every able-bodied man, you hold the high ground, and you pray for a miracle. But the Lord speaks to Gideon in Judges 7, verse 2. Read what he says. "The people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, Mine own hand hath saved me." Stop right there. The people are too many. It is a stunning reversal of battlefield mathematics. God is not looking at Gideon's ranks and worrying about their survival. He is looking at their numbers and worrying about their pride. The King James uses the word vaunt. In Hebrew, it is power, to beautify, to glorify, to boast. If Israel wins with 32,000, they will build monuments to their own tactical brilliance. God is preparing to win a war with shattered clay, and you cannot share glory with dirt. So the stripping of the sword begins. God issues a command in verse 3. "Whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead." Watch what the text does. Look at the name of the water source where they are camped. The spring of Harod. In Hebrew, Harod means trembling. It is the well of panic. They are drinking from the waters of terror while staring down at an ocean of enemy tents. There is an old rabbinic tradition that the mention of Mount Gilead here implies a specific testing ground for the tribe of Manasseh. But whatever the exact ancient borders, the physical geography is married to the psychology. I hold it as that, one reading of the ancient mind. And when the offer to leave is spoken out loud at the well of trembling, 22,000 men turn their backs and walk away. Picture it, 2/3 of the army, vanishing into the hills, 22,000 swords dropping out of the narrative. The hands that will eventually hold the trumpet and the fire must be completely emptied of their own strength first. You cannot carry a heavy earthen pitcher if your fingers are desperately clutching a javelin. 10,000 men remain. 10,000 men who looked at the Midianite horde, tasted the waters of trembling, and decided to stay. These are the brave ones, the hardened ones, the ones ready to draw blood. But the Lord speaks again in verse 4. The people are yet too many. Sit with that. God is not looking for the brave. He is looking for something else entirely. The army of 10,000 is commanded to march down to the water's edge. They are about to face a test that has nothing to do with their sword arm, their courage, or their pedigree. 10,000 brave men are told to kneel at a riverbank, entirely unaware that a simple bodily motion is about to strip away 9,700 more. The spring of trembling is about to become a testing ground of strange and specific physical posture. What exactly was God looking for in the hands and mouths of the men who bent down to drink? The sun beats down on the 10,000 men, standing at the muddy edge of the spring of Harod. They break rank, drop their weapons on the bank, and step into the shallow, running water. Thirst and the adrenaline of the coming slaughter drive them down to the riverbed. Judges chapter 7, verse 5 captures the strange instruction. "So he brought down the people unto the water, and the Lord said unto Gideon, Every one that lappeth of the water with his tongue, as a dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself. Likewise every one that boweth down upon his knees to drink." Stop right there. God is sorting an army based on the specific mechanics of a sip of water. We often assume this is a tactical test. The assumption is that the alert soldier keeps his head up, while the careless soldier buries his face blindly in the stream. But watch what the text does. The division is not about military readiness. It is about muscle memory. Look at the posture of the vast majority. 9,700 men drop completely to their knees to drink. In the ancient Near East, bowing the knee was not just a resting stance. It was the universal, instinctual physical posture of idolatry. Gideon had just spent chapter 6 destroying his father's altar to Baal, a Canaanite fertility god whose worship demanded followers bow down and kiss the earth. The prophet Elijah will later hear God say in 1 Kings 19 that he has preserved a remnant in Israel, defined entirely by all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal. I hold this as one reading, not the final word, but it fits the theology of the valley perfectly. God is actively filtering out men whose bodies automatically default to the physical posture of pagan submission. A compromised knee cannot stand on the midnight ridge. But look at the 300 who remain. Verse 6 tells us exactly how they drank, putting their hand to their mouth. They do not bow. They crouch slightly, reach down, cup the water in their palms, and lift it to their lips like a dog lapping from a bowl. See the scene. Look closely at the physical shape of their hands. Fingers curled, palms hollowed out, creating a temporary, fragile container to hold the water. They are unknowingly practicing the exact grip they will need for the cad, the heavy earthen pitcher they are destined to carry into the dark. God is choosing men whose hands know how to hold a vessel of earth without crushing it. Men who can cradle water just as carefully as they will cradle hidden fire. Same shape, same grip. The 300 stand dripping on the bank, while the 9,700 are dismissed to their tents. Gideon is now left with a microforce, a fraction of a fraction. 300 men against 135,000 Midianite and Amalekite warriors. The math has moved from improbable to suicidal. The sword arm of Israel has been entirely amputated. Before the torches are lit, before the clay is handed out, God tells Gideon to go down into the enemy camp under the cover of deep darkness. He is sent to listen, and what he hears outside a nomad's tent is not a strategic military briefing, but a terrified whisper about a piece of bread. What could a burned loaf of barley possibly mean to a seasoned Midianite killer? And why does an ancient Aramaic text say it was never really about bread at all? Gideon and his servant Phurah creep down into the blackness of the valley of Jezreel. Picture it. Two men moving silently through the shadows of 135,000 sleeping killers. They reach the perimeter of the Midianite camp, crouching outside a heavy leather nomad tent. Inside, two sentries are whispering in the dark. Judges chapter 7, verse 13 captures the exact moment. And when Gideon was come, behold, there was a man that told a dream unto his fellow, and said, Behold, I dreamed a dream. And lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came unto a tent, and smote it that it fell, and overturned it that the tent lay along. Stop right there. A cake of barley bread. In the ancient Near East, fine wheat was the food of men. Barley was the food of livestock. It was the absolute lowest rung of sustenance, the cheap ration of the impoverished and the desperate. A heavy, dense, unglamorous lump of baked grain rolling down a hill to crush a reinforced military pavilion. The physics are absurd. The symbolism is exact. Watch what the text does. The second sentry does not laugh at the dream. He panics. Verse 14 gives his immediate, terrified interpretation. This is nothing else save the sword of Gideon the son of Joash, a man of Israel. For into his hand hath God delivered Midian and all the host. Read that again. The Midianites already know Gideon's name. They are already terrified of a man they outnumber 400 to 1. But there is a deeper layer buried in the Aramaic. Targum Jonathan, an ancient Aramaic translation and commentary on the prophets, unlocks the specific cultural weight of this vision. In the Targumic rendering, the barley loaf is explicitly tied to the merit of a people who have been stripped down to nothing. Barley requires a brutal threshing process to become flour, and it is baked in heavy clay ovens. The Targum reveals that the Midianites subconsciously understood that Israel, battered and impoverished like barley, was carrying a divine weight that no bronze sword could stop. I offer it as that, one tradition's record, but it exposes the psychological rot at the heart of the enemy camp. Same valley, same terror. They are heavily armed, but they are haunted. They are dreaming of their own destruction at the hands of peasant food baked in earth. Gideon bows his head in the dark. He worships right there in the dirt outside the tent. The battle is already won in the minds of the enemy. He just needs to orchestrate the panic. He climbs back up the ridge to the 300. He does not hand out iron. He hands out the exact texture of the Midianite nightmare. He gives them the cad, baked earth. He hands them the physical manifestation of the heavy, tumbling loaf that the sentries are already sweating over. Gideon has returned to the ridge to hand his men the heavy clay of their enemy's nightmare. But the specific vocabulary of these three items reveals they were never meant for a battlefield. Why did God arm an attack force entirely with the instruments of a blood altar? See the scene. Gideon is moving through the ranks of the 300 on the dark ridge. He is not handing out bronze or iron. He is pressing three specific items into the sweating palms of his men. The inventory in Judges 7:16 is exact, and he divided the 300 men into 3 companies. And he put a trumpet in every man's hand, with empty pitchers and lamps within the pitchers. Stop right there. Translate those 3 English words back into the original Hebrew, and the battlefield completely vanishes. You are no longer looking at an armory. You are looking at a sanctuary. First, the trumpet. In the King James translation, the word trumpet can mean several things. The silver trumpets of Numbers 10, the Hatzotzra, were the standard military instruments. They were hammered metal used by commanders to signal troop movements and sound cavalry alarms. But the word in Judges 7 is not Hatzotzra, it is shofar, the curved, hollowed-out horn of a dead ram. The shofar is the instrument of the altar. It is the sound of the jubilee, the warning of the prophet, and the echo of the ram caught in the thicket at the binding of Isaac. It is bone, not metal. It calls heaven down to earth. Second, the empty pitcher. The Hebrew word is kad. It is an earthen vessel, heavy and rigidly fragile. It is the same word used in 1 Kings 17 for the barrel of meal that miraculously kept the widow of Zarephath alive. It is a domestic container, the vessel of the flour offering. It is born from the dust of the ground and hardened in the violent heat of an oven. The Midianites below are sleeping under the protection of forged iron. The Israelites above are holding baked dirt. Third, the lamp. The Hebrew is lapid. This is not a gentle, flickering oil lamp. It is a blazing, smoking torch. Where else does a lapid appear in the thick darkness of the Old Testament? Go back to Genesis chapter 15, to the precise moment God makes his blood covenant with Abraham. Abraham has laid out the divided bodies of animal sacrifices on the dirt. Genesis 15:17 records the terrifying scene. And it came to pass that when the sun went down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace, and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. Read that again. A burning lamp, a lapid, moving through the severed pieces of a blood sacrifice in the dead of night. Same fire, same covenant. Watch what the text does. Gideon has not armed a militia. He has equipped a priesthood. The horn of the sacrifice, the clay of the meal offering, the fire of the covenant. These 300 men are not preparing for a standard infantry skirmish. They are standing on the high ridge, preparing to execute a massive, valley-wide sacrifice. The Midianite coalition is not an opposing army. They are the offering on the altar. I hold this as one reading of the ancient text. Not the final word, but it perfectly explains why God removed the swords from Israel. You do not bring a standard infantry blade to a holy war. You bring the elements of the sanctuary, earth, bone, and fire. But the ram's horn in their hands carried a weight far heavier than just a loud noise in the dark. If they were priests preparing for an eschatological slaughter, what exactly did the blast of the shofar mean to the ancient Jewish mind? And how did a scroll buried in the caves of Qumran map out its devastating frequency? The wind moves across the ridge. 300 men stand in the absolute dark, pressing the hollowed bone of the ram's horn against their lips. They are waiting for Gideon's signal, their lungs burning with the cold night air. Judges chapter 7, verse 18. In the King James Version records the general's final command before they spread out along the perimeter. When I blow with a trumpet, I and all that are with me, then blow ye the trumpets, also on every side of all the camp, and say, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Read that again. They are commanded to shout about a sword they are not holding. The only weapon in their grip is a piece of dead bone. But the sound of the shofar in ancient Israel was never meant to be a simple battle cry. It was a devastating spiritual frequency. The Dead Sea Scrolls, sealed in jars in the caves of Qumran 2,000 years ago, contain a shattered manuscript known today as the War Scroll. It details the exact apocalyptic liturgy of the final battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. In this Essen text, the sounding of the horn is a highly choreographed, lethal theology. The priests of the scroll are strictly forbidden from drawing blades. Instead, they blow a sustained, terrifying note designed to paralyze the hearts of the enemy, followed by a sharp, staccato blast that signals divine slaughter. I offer it as that, one ancient tradition's record of holy war, but it reveals the terrifying weight of what Gideon's men are holding to their mouths. The shofar makes no sound on its own. It requires the breath of a living man to pass through the remains of a sacrificed animal. In Hebrew, the word for breath is ruach, the exact same word used for the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the deep in Genesis. They are literally blowing the breath of the Creator through the horn of the altar. Same breath, same victory. Go back to the book of Joshua. We have seen this specific weapon unmake a fortress before. The impregnable walls of Jericho were not brought down by siege engines or sappers mining beneath the stones. Joshua 6:20 records the bizarre mechanism of destruction. So the people shouted when the priests blew with the trumpets. And it came to pass, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. Stop right there. No iron. No battering rams, just the sustained sound of the shofar shaking the physical architecture of the earth. Gideon is reconstructing the exact ritual of Jericho on the ridge of Jezreel. We assume the blast of the horn on this mountain is a signal meant to wake up a hidden Israelite army in the hills. It is not. It is a sonic weapon meant to unmake the minds of the Midianite coalition sleeping below them. But the breath passing through the bone is only the prelude. The horn announces the terror, but it does not expose it. The true weapon of this midnight watch is hiding in their other hand. 300 men are, gripping an airtight earthen jar, and somehow, a blazing torch is surviving inside the pitch-black clay. How does the lapid burn without suffocating in the dark? And what exactly happens to a seasoned warrior's eye when that violent light is suddenly set free? The middle watch, the dead center of the night. Judges 7, 19 inches. The King James Version locks onto the exact hour. So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him came unto the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch. And they had but newly set the watch, and they blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers that were in their hands. Stop right there. Focus on the physical paradox happening in the moments right before the glass shatters. A cad is a thick, heavy storage vessel, usually sealed to protect flour or oil from vermin and moisture. Inside it is a lapid, a smoking, blazing torch. Basic physics demands that fire requires three things to survive: heat, fuel, and oxygen. If you shove a blazing piece of pitch-soaked wood into a narrow-necked clay jar and cover the opening with your hand, the flame chokes. It starves in the dark. Read that again. 300 men have been hiking down the uneven terrain of the ridge, maneuvering into position around the perimeter of the sprawling Midianite camp. This took time. They are holding heavy jars. The torches inside should have suffocated before they ever reached the valley floor. Watch what the text does. It never explains how the fire survives, but the Old Testament has shown us this specific, physics-defying flame before. Go back to the backside of the desert in Exodus chapter 3, verse 2. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Same fire, same desert. Moses watched a flame that required no fuel. Gideon's men are holding a flame that requires no oxygen. Divine fire sustains itself. The men are gripping a miracle in their left hand, a fire burning furiously in a breathless tomb of dirt. Picture it. The men are entirely concealed. In the ancient world, the night was absolute blackness. There is no ambient light pollution. The beginning of the middle watch places this right around midnight, the deepest, coldest hour of the human circadian rhythm, when the body is chemically paralyzed in heavy sleep. The sentries have just rotated. Their eyes have not yet adjusted to the deep dark. The Midianites are looking out into an ocean of black space. They see nothing, but the fire is there. It is just hidden. The clay is doing its job perfectly. A cad is not a lantern. A lantern is designed with vents to let the light bleed out. A cad is solid earth. It traps the brilliance entirely. The men are carrying divine light, but as long as the earthen vessel remains intact, the valley remains in darkness. Sit with that. The clay is not a tool to display the fire. The clay is a prison. The light is trapped inside the dirt, furious and waiting. The only way the fire can do its work, the only way the terror can be released, is if the earthen vessel is violently destroyed. The earth must be broken. 300 men stand in the pitch black. The heavy clay in their hands is warm to the touch. The silence of the valley is heavy and absolute. Gideon lifts the ram's horn to his lips and prepares to unleash the breath of the altar. The clay is about to break. But what actually happens to the anatomy of a seasoned warrior when absolute darkness is violently and instantly replaced by 300 blazing fires? Gideon fills his lungs with the freezing air of the Jezreel ridge. He presses the hollow bone of the ram's horn to his mouth and blows a single piercing note into the dark. In that exact fraction of a second, 300 men violently smash heavy clay jars against the rocks at their feet. See the scene. The silence of the valley is instantly obliterated. 300 earthen vessels shatter simultaneously, sounding like the sudden crashing of heavy chariot wheels. But the sound is not the primary weapon. Judges, chapter 7, verse 20, records the terrifying sensory assault. And the three companies blew the trumpets, and brake the pitchers, and held the lamps in their left hands, and the trumpets in their right hands to blow withal. And they cried, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon." Stop right there. Focus on the physical anatomy of a human eye in the middle watch of the night. Down in the valley, 135,000 men are asleep in absolute pitch-black darkness. Their pupils are dilated to maximum capacity. when thick clay is suddenly shattered to expose 300 blazing, smoking torches, the light does not gently illuminate the camp. It violently blinds the eye. Night vision is instantly erased. Flavius Josephus details the terrifying psychology of this exact moment. He writes that the Midianite coalition was a chaotic mixture of different nomadic tribes speaking different dialects. Waking violently to the apocalyptic blast of the shofars and the blinding, shifting shadows cast by the torches, they could not recognize the men sleeping next to them. I hold this as his telling, not as proven fact, but the human biology of the panic aligns perfectly with the Hebrew text. The Midianites are terrified, blind, and heavily armed. They grab their iron. They strike furiously at the nearest moving shadow. Judges 7:22 captures the devastating result. And the 300 blew the trumpets, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host. Read that again. The Lord set every man's sword against his fellow. The 300 Israelites on the ridge never draw a blade. They never charge down the hill. They just stand there, blowing the breath of the altar and holding the fire. The prophesied sword of Gideon the sentry dreamed about earlier was not an Israelite weapon at all. It was the Midianites' own iron, turned backward by terror. Same valley, same blood. The massive war machine of the enemy destroys itself from the inside out. The barley loaf has rolled into the camp and crushed the tent, just as the dream foretold. The panic of Harod, the trembling water, has been perfectly transferred from the men of Israel into the hearts of the enemy. The victory in the valley required the absolute slaughter of an empire, orchestrated entirely by a blinding light and a terrifying sound. But the broken pieces of clay scattered across the ridge are still holding the deepest layer of the text. Why did the God of Israel demand that the earthen vessel be completely destroyed before the fire inside could finally save the nation? Go back now to the high ridge where this film began, the middle watch of the night, the 300 men standing at the edge of the valley of Jezreel, both hands entirely occupied. No steel, no shields, just the curved bone of a dead ram and an earthen jar holding a fire that refuses to choke. You have read that scene 100 times, but tonight, the clay is not just a tactical camouflage for a night raid. The cad, the heavy baked dirt, is the final physical manifestation of everything God had been doing to Gideon's army since the spring of Harod. Remember the water test. Remember the barley loaf. God spent days stripping away 22,000 men who carried the trembling of panic. He stripped away 9,700 who carried the muscle memory of idolatry in their knees. He methodically dismantled a 32,000-man war machine because he refused to let Israel boast that their own right hand had saved them. He reduced their strength to nothing. He reduced them to barley. Watch what the text does. The earthen vessel in their left hand is the ultimate symbol of that human weakness. It is made of dust. It is heavy, clumsy, and fragile. And as long as the clay remains whole, the valley stays entirely in the dark. The divine fire of the covenant, the lapid, is trapped inside, burning furiously, but obscured by the walls of the dirt. The vessel must break. The men on the ridge did not win the battle by drawing swords. They won it by violently destroying the work of their own hands. They took the thick clay and smashed it against the rocks, obliterating the earthly container, so the unearthly light could finally spill out and blind the enemy. Same hill, same theology. Centuries later, the Apostle Paul, a Hebrew of Hebrews trained by rabbis, would catch the exact echo of this midnight ridge. He writes in 2 Corinthians 4:7, "But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us." Stop right there. Earthen vessels. The excellency of the power. It is the exact translation of Gideon's war. I hold this as one reading a deep theological thread woven between the valley of Jezreel and the epistles of the early church, not the final word, but the parallel is exact. You cannot go into holy war trusting the integrity of your own clay. We know why the iron was taken away. We know why the horn of the altar replaced the trumpet of the commander. We know why the Midianites turned their own blades against each other in the blinding panic of the sudden light. The mystery of the reduced army is resolved in the shattering of the jars. But the text never tells us what happened to the fire. After the camp was slaughtered, after the valley floor was emptied of its 135,000 oppressors, where did the 300 leave those blazing, breathless torches when the sun finally came up over Jezreel? We do not know. The dirt of the valley is still holding the rest of that secret. If this text broke something open for you today, comment the word "watched" down below. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep pulling the canonical thread and send this to one specific person who loves Old Testament military history, but has never heard the theology of the shattered clay. The fire is only terrifying to the dark.